The rain had just begun to fall in thin, trembling lines when I saw her standing beside a broken car on the side of the road, her silhouette framed by blinking hazard lights like a quiet distress signal in the dark. Something in that moment pulled at me harder than fear ever could, the way she stood there alone, trying to look strong while the world felt like it was closing in on her from every direction. I did not know her name, her story, or the storm she was carrying inside, but I knew one thing with absolute clarity: if I drove past her that night, I would carry that guilt for the rest of my life. And before this story unfolds, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet power of helping a stranger, take a moment to like, share, comment, and subscribe to this channel, because these stories live only when they are felt and passed on. I was already exhausted that evening, weighed down by another long shift and the heavy silence of a house waiting for me that never truly felt like home. My life had become a loop of early mornings, late nights, and the persistent ache of loneliness I pretended not to feel. So when I pulled over beside her broken-down car on that narrow countryside road, it felt less like a heroic choice and more like a desperate reach for meaning. She looked up with wide, startled eyes when I approached, rain clinging to her hair and jacket, her hands trembling not just from the cold but from fear she had tried and failed to hide. Her car had died without warning, her phone battery was nearly gone, and the nearest town was miles away. In her eyes, I saw the same quiet panic I often felt inside myself, the fear of being stranded in a world that does not slow down for anyone. I tried every small thing I knew, lifting the hood, checking what little I could, but it was clear the problem was far beyond my simple understanding. The engine was silent in that final, defeated way that tells you hope will not come from a quick fix. The rain grew heavier, the road emptier, and the night colder. She stood a few steps away, arms wrapped around herself, pretending she was fine, pretending she was not terrified. I remember the exact moment the words rose from somewhere deeper than logic, when I told her she could come home with me, that my mom would love her, that she would be safe, warm, and not alone for the night. The word surprised even me, because I had not brought anyone home in years, not since life had taught me how fragile connections could be. There was a long hesitation in her eyes, the kind that comes from someone who has learned the hard way that trust is dangerous. But the rain kept falling, the road stayed empty, and fear eventually outweighed doubt. She nodded slowly, silently agreeing to place her safety in the hands of a stranger. The drive back was quiet at first, the windshield wipers moving like a steady heartbeat between two lives that had not meant to collide. I could feel her watching the passing darkness, every turn of the road another test of trust. Slowly, almost cautiously, the tension eased, and she began to speak in soft fragments about her day gone wrong, about trying to get back to her mother who was waiting for her in another city, about how this breakdown felt like the final weight on an already unbearable week. I did not interrupt. I let her words fall where they needed to fall, because sometimes being heard is the first step toward healing. When we arrived at my home, the porch light spilled warm yellow onto the wet ground, and for the first time that night, I saw her take a full breath. My mother answered the door with the same gentle warmth she had offered every stranger my entire life, as if kindness were her natural language. She did not ask many questions at first. She only saw a young woman soaked, shaken, and in need of shelter, and she welcomed her without hesitation. In that moment, something inside me cracked open quietly. I had grown so used to thinking the world was a harsh place that I had forgotten how soft it could be when people chose kindness over suspicion. Inside, the house filled with the comforting sounds of warmth returning to cold bones, the kettle boiling, towels being folded, the hum of quiet conversation drifting through rooms that had felt empty for too long. My mother offered her dry clothes, warm food, and a place to rest as if she were a long-lost relative instead of a stranger found on the roadside. I watched the girl's shoulders slowly relax, watched the guarded fear in her eyes soften into fragile gratitude. She sat at our table trembling slightly as she held a warm cup in her hands, and I saw in her the reflection of every time I had ever needed kindness and been too afraid to ask for it. As the night stretched on, she shared more of her story in pieces that carried quiet pain. She spoke of broken plans, of family tensions, of trying to be strong far longer than anyone should have to. I shared my own small truths too, not as confessions but as offerings of understanding. In that exchange, something sacred formed between us, not romance, not destiny, but a simple human bond born from mutual vulnerability. We were two people who had been worn thin by life, briefly resting in the same fragile moment of safety. She slept on the couch that night while I lay awake in my room, listening to the rain tap against the windows, thinking about how strange it was that a single choice could ripple so deeply through two lives. I realized how easily I could have driven past her, convinced myself it was not my problem, how easily fear and indifference could have won. And I wondered how many moments like this I had already missed in my life by choosing comfort over courage. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a quiet, washed-clean world. Sunlight filtered through the trees, and birds called from somewhere beyond the fields. She woke with an expression that held both relief and a lingering sadness, as if she already feared the moment this small island of warmth would disappear. We arranged for help for her car, called a roadside service, and planned her next steps. My mother packed her food for the road, pressing the bag into her hands with a tenderness that made her eyes fill with tears she did not try to hide. When it was time for her to leave, standing once again at the edge of the road where we had first met under such different skies, the weight of goodbye settled heavily in the air. There was no promise to stay in touch, no dramatic farewell, only the quiet understanding that we had been exactly what each other needed for one fragile night. As she left, I felt a strange mix of loss and fulfillment, as though something had ended and begun at the same time. In the days that followed, life returned to its routine, but something inside me was irrevocably changed. I found myself looking at strangers differently, wondering what silent battles they carried, what unseen storms they were trying to survive. The memory of her trembling hands around that warm cup stayed with me, a reminder that even the smallest act of kindness can become a lifeline in someone's darkest hour. I realized that night had not just rescued her from the roadside, it had rescued a forgotten part of me that still believed in the goodness of people. And now, before we reach the end of this story, I want to make a special request to you watching this. Please comment one word that this story made you feel, just one honest word from your heart. Near the end of the week, something unexpected happened. I received a simple message from an unknown number. It was her. Her car had been repaired. She had safely reached her mother. And she wanted to thank me again, not just for the ride, but for reminding her that the world still held strangers who cared. I read that message over and over, not because of what it said about me, but because of what it said about humanity. If this story touched your heart even a little, if it reminded you that kindness still matters in a noisy, distracted world, I ask you from the depths of this moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your feelings, and subscribe to the channel so more stories like this can find their way into the hearts that need them most. Because sometimes, all it takes to change a life is one car breakdown, one brave choice to stop, and one open door in the middle of the storm.